Alex, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Justin.
So tell us, where did you grow up and what did your parents do?
I grew up in central Vermont, and my dad was a elementary school principal and a superintendent, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom for a while, and then got into community organizing and to political organizing.
Okay, so summarize what you do here. What do you study and why?
Yeah, I mean, we study like the people side of conservation. Most conservation challenges aren't just about like the ecology or the technology. They're about human behavior and perceptions. And so we study those aspects of conservation issues.
When you say we, who's this we?
Yeah, the we, it used to be more me and my wife, but she has moved into the dark side of university administration now, and as I sarcastically call it. And so it's me and grad students and other collaborators.
Excellent. And how long have you been here?
I've been here since 2011.
Okay. Why do you collaborate with a marketing professor? That sounds like, fraught terrain for a conservation scientist.
Yeah, and I think it's sometimes foreign to conservationists to hear that. But I mean, fundamentally, I think of marketing as about understanding human behavior. Mm-hmm. And using it to build relationships between people selling things and people buying things. And conservation is somewhat similar in that we are thinking a lot about human behavior and how to encourage or discourage different types of conservation-related behavior. So there's a lot, I think, that conservationists can learn from marketing fields to do a better job.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of what was the source code of our collaboration. When did we start working on stuff together?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly what the year was. I remember being at a Christmas party at someone's house.
Okay.
And I think we were both avoiding the crowd and connected over the fact that we both kind of studied related things, but in very different domains, and then thought that there might be an opportunity to work together.
Yeah. Fast forward several years, and you've been interested in wolves for a while. We'll talk about our collaboration on wolves, but talk about your interest in wolves, the topic of wolves, and more broadly, wolves and people, because it is more of a people problem than an animal problem in many ways.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm drawn to particularly controversial issues, things that people like to fight over in terms of conservation. And so being, new to Montana relatively, the wolf topic was front and center in the conservation domain, and it was something that I didn't really want to study right away, but we started doing some work with Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks to understand people's attitudes towards wolves.
Pause on that. You didn't want to study it right away? Was there some sort of like, I'm a junior scientist here, I don't want to step on those landmines too early in my career? Is that what you were thinking?
Not so much like protectionist of myself, but I want to do the issue justice. Like it's a sticky wicket.
For sure.
And so you have to do it right. And you have to be aware of all of the landmines, mm-hmm. whether they're for your career or for your research or whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, is it too hot to just say traps?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can we make wolf jokes in this show?
I think so. Lots of puns intended.
I mean, if you can't joke about wolves, what can you joke about? Anyway.
Yeah.
So I understand that. I mean, when I got here in 2012, I really had no exposure to wolves. Growing up out east, there weren't any around. Then I lived in the Bay Area. Then I lived in Seattle. No real interaction with wolves. And I stumbled into the topic in a class here and just got this sense right away, like, whoa, this is hotter than politics. This is hotter than religion. This is hotter than talking about body image in a class. Like, this is almost felt nuclear, like tread lightly on this topic.
Yeah, I mean, the controversy kind of transcends the region. Like, I remember being a freshman in college in the 90s and giving a presentation about wolves and dressing up as a rancher and trying my best to like present the perspective of a rancher with wolves, and my classmate dressing up as an environmentalist and like really just trying to act out the conflict that we saw from 3,000 miles away. So this is a conservation issue that people link to deep parts of who they are and how they interact with other people. and power dynamics among people. And so, yeah, that's what's kind of fascinated me, is it's kind of bigger than wolves. It's about all sorts of different ways that people interact with each other.
Yeah, and then there's something unique about wolves as well. They hold a particular space in our imagination, in fairy tale and lore, in legend, etc. So there is this sort of cultural force, or force across cultures, that wolves occupy.
Yeah, I mean, from Greek mythology through the fairy tales that we grew up with, that were, that we've always heard, and unlike bears, which I also do a lot of work on, wolves have kind of a universally negative image in those stories.
Yeah, portrayed negatively, except for some indigenous cultures portray them positively.
Yes, absolutely. But I think, like, when you look at movies, I mean, to this day, like whether I'm watching Frozen or I'm watching a Bourne movie, like there's a wolf and it's not a good thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And so in a world where we've removed wolves from the landscape, we rely on those stories a lot to inform kind of what we think about these species. And so I think the fact that the stories that we tell ourselves about wolves are overwhelmingly negative has a pretty profound role to play here.
Yeah, you mentioned a few moments ago that when it comes to wolves, we're often getting at really deep-seated notions of who we are. Another word for that is identity. And over the course of our collaborations, somewhat recently, you came to me with questions about identity, maybe knowing or not knowing that that's where my dissertation was, in identity, and that's where a lot of my marketing scholarship has been. But how did you get interested in identity, and how is it relevant to your work as a social scientist in conservation?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like identity is the thing that was like always there that I couldn't put a name to, right? So like, I grew up in Vermont, you grew up in New Hampshire. Like, we got a little rivalry going there.
Oh, yeah.
That is irrelevant and unknown to people here in Montana. As a Vermonter who was born in New York State.
I know, that's an identity threat.
Yeah.
Just admitting that fact is inconvenient for you.
That was a real part of growing up. Almost every conversation you had with a new person or about an issue began with, are you from Vermont? And what they meant was, do you have like 3 generations in the ground yet?
Yeah.
And if you didn't, you somehow didn't have a right to be a part of the conversation. And then in lots of conservation spaces, luckily we don't do a lot of this anymore, but you go to these like really big public meetings and everyone's looking around and they're all seeing what each other are wearing. Maybe you're looking at the bumper stickers and the types of vehicles people drove in on, and you're making like assumptions and decisions about what you think people are going to say and whose side you're on based on all of these identity signals. And then I could go on this thread for a while, but being a professor who has spent a lot of time on campuses, but I also work in really rural spaces, and I'm a hunter, and I've got a couple degrees in forestry, spent a lot of time in the woods. Like, I live at these weird intersections of my own identity where people make assumptions about me that can either be really helpful to what I'm up to or really just completely undermine it. And so the power of that was always there. And I wanted to, I guess thinking about the identity work that you've done helped me get some tools to really start teasing that apart, and putting some words and some data to those forces that identity drives in these conservation issues.
Was there an experience, whether it was at a public meeting or some sort of a seminar or classroom experience, where you thought that identity in particular was a important force to consider in the discourse around wolves?
Around wolves.
Yeah.
Well, I can't think of one with wolves right off the top of my bat, but
or with wildlife in general. I mean, knowing that wolves are controversial, that was probably an easy jump. But at what point were you like, "Ooh, this is identity at work"?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's always been there. Like I said, like I can think back to a debate back in New England about establishing this wildlife management area, and there was big tension between the logging interests and the hunting interests and the environmental and conservation interests. And from like a logical and fact standpoint, I can say this 20 years removed, 25, there was no disagreement. Like everyone was on the same page. Everyone wanted hunting to continue. Everyone wanted logging and public access to continue. They wanted to conserve this area. But they couldn't get on the same page because they came to the table on different sides and they couldn't get over it. And so whoever came up to the mic, it didn't really matter what they said. It mattered who they were. And just watching that division that didn't need to be there was, just profound.
Yeah, and we see it often with, in the conservation space, there's a variety of outreach organizations, people trying to do good work, right? And a lot of that trying to do good work can inadvertently activate identity. You get cast as a conservationist. There's a slippery slope from that to an environmentalist. That code's left. That is almost instantaneously in political conflict with other groups, oftentimes the groups that those outreach agents are trying to collaborate with.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think, if you think and study kind of message or behavior change or persuasion, having the right message is important that's matched to your audience, but the messenger can make or break the whole thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And so if the folks you're talking to and trying to connect with see you as other, it really doesn't matter what you say. They're not going to listen to you. Mm-hmm. And so those identity forces are always at work. We are evolutionarily trained to be on the lookout for other groups and protecting our in-group. And so if we are inadvertently stumbling into those in the wrong way, we're working against ourselves. And there's lots of tools that we can use to kind of turn those forces toward uniting people and bringing people together.
Well, let's talk about this paper we've done. It is forthcoming in Conservation Biology, which you tell me is a good journal, and I appreciate that. The title is riveting. It is Political Identity Activation and Inaccurate Metaperceptions Contribute to Unnecessary Polarization of Attitudes Towards Wolves.
I mean, we're academics after all, right?
Yeah, I mean, that just rolls off the tongue right there. Makes you want to read it.
Mm-hmm.
If not, take a nap first.
The rest of it is as page-turning.
Yeah. Indeed, it is. But like, what's happening here? What is political identity activation?
Yeah, so this gets at the idea, and you probably know more about this than I do, so I got to ask you some questions here too. But identity activation kind of comes from the idea that we contain multitudes, right? We are not just Democrats or Republicans. We are fathers or mothers. We are Montanans. We are hunters or fishermen or fill in the blank.
Sure.
And in different contexts, different identities are more important. Mm-hmm. Or we might be kind of looking at the world through the lens of a particular identity. And those lenses really matter. Like they can distort how we interpret reality, how we interpret distances and sizes and facts that are right in front of us. And so, but we can't think through all those lenses at the same time. So the identity activation piece is when you're in a particular context and an identity is activated, you're looking at the world through that lens. It's not the only identity you possess, and others may, serve to have you look at the world a different way.
Sure. I think a good example of just this, how this identity activation can be accessible to anybody is, like, if you're the only man sitting in a room full of women, you're going to experience your gender identity in a different way than if you were a man in a group of only men, if you're a woman in a group of only men, or if you were just in a group of, some random assortment of genders. The contextual variables can dial it up or dial it down.
Yep. Yeah, and so this activation is, taking a particular identity and making it salient or making it in the forefront of someone's mind so that when they are thinking about an issue, they're looking through that identity lens and not another one.
So we had this intuition that, well, it's more than intuition. You've done extensive survey research in, states with wolves that show that people actually report pretty favorable attitudes towards wolves, despite what we're made to think through the media, there's actually a fair amount of agreement about wolves. Is that true?
Absolutely. Yeah. And we see this across the world. We see this across time. I think one of the first kind of meta studies that looked at 38 other wolf studies was done in the early 2000s, looking at studies across the globe, and found majority support for wolves across all of those studies. In the United States, we've had studies in Utah, in lake states, that show majority support for wolves, high attitudes. And then our own work here in Montana has shown attitudes towards wolves are exceptionally high, and tolerance of wolves is high as well and increasing.
And just to get into the technical bits of that surveying, just knowing that these are primarily Republican states and that you've been drawing representative samples of those populations, though you don't talk about politics in those particular studies, it is fair to say that the affinity or tolerance of wolves is well distributed across the political divide.
Yeah. Yeah, so like in our last survey of Montanans, we found that 74% of Montana residents were tolerant or very tolerant of wolves.
Yeah.
And you don't get to 74% in Montana without having that be something that's true on both sides of the political spectrum.
So this intuition or observation is that, hey, we might not be as divided as we think. And then we have this hypothesis that, well, maybe identity is driving this. So we construct this experiment where we activate people's identity with a simple manipulation. We just get them to write out 3 things that describe the average Democrat, 3 things that describe the average Republican, and then we ask them which party they would choose to affiliate with if they had to. That activates identity, and when participants in our study experience that little manipulation, what happened with their attitudes towards wolves?
Yeah, so I think it's important to kind of set the stage for the folks that we didn't activate. So kind of our control group. And these folks came from all sorts of states that have wolves in the U.S., so lake states, western states. And the folks that we didn't activate, we see what we see in all these other surveys. We see fairly high attitudes towards wolves. That's true among liberals. It's true among conservatives. Until we did the political activation. And then we saw people kind of retreat into their camps, and the division that we tend to assume is there showed up. We saw Democrats' attitudes towards wolves significantly increase, and conservatives' attitudes significantly decrease.
Just by reminding them or making them think about their political affiliations.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah. And what do we think is driving that?
Yeah, well, we didn't know. So we did a couple follow-up experiments. I mean, there's a couple theories about like what's going on there. The first would be that if you remind someone of their political party, they think about their political party and the other political party, and they might want to distance themselves from the other party. And so they kind of move their attitude away from what they think the other party believes. And you have the fancy term for that, reasoning through antagonation.
Reasoning from antagonism.
There you go. I never get that right. And then the other kind of way it could be happening is people think about their own group. They think about their own political party, and they're like, what is, quote unquote, a good Republican think about wolves? And they adjust their attitude to kind of fit into their in-group. So we did a follow experiment to see which one of those was going on. And it, at least in this context, it is much more that kind of in-group conformity that's going on with attitudes towards wolves.
So people think their in-group is more extreme in its attitudes towards wolves than it actually is.
Yep.
So if I'm a Republican participant in the study, if I'm making an estimate about what I think the average Republican thinks about wolves, I think it is more negative than it actually is.
That's right.
And the same holds true for Democrats, but in the positive direction. So the average or a Democrat participant in our study, when asked what they think the average Democrat thinks about wolves, reported a more positive estimate of their in-group's attitude than what actually held.
Yeah, and so that like assumption those assumptions that we hold about the division
Yeah.
actually play a role in creating that division, at least when we're looking at this issue through that political lens.
And we can bring them back from the brink, right? We can correct. What happened when we corrected these meta-perceptions? That's a terrible word, but it's a technical term in the study.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the assumptions that you hold about what other people think.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think other people think? Right. So for a final group, we asked them what they thought about their in-group, and then we corrected them. We gave them the actual number that we had measured in the first study. And what we saw is that attitudes then began to moderate again. Now, they didn't move that much.
Sure.
But they moved significantly, and they moved back toward one another. And I think this serves to show that these identity forces and the assumptions that we make about division, they paint a dynamic world, right? It's not that people hate wolves and people love wolves and that's what you get. It's that people look through their identity lenses at different times through this issue, and the assumptions that we are making about one another can create division, but correcting those assumptions can bring people back together.
And I think it tells a bit of a story. We have to be clear here. So we just described the entirety of our study and what our data showed pretty much. Now we're going to transition into a little bit more speculative territory. But one of the perhaps forces driving this dynamic is our media environment. Where do those meta-perceptions come from?
Right.
They potentially come from this narrative that we're fed in the media that wolves are divisive, that people really like wolves and people really hate wolves, and there's just high conflict. The conflict is portrayed in the media pretty commonly. That's what we see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and two things can be true here. There are people who really, really love wolves, and there are people who really, really don't like wolves.
That's true, and those are often the people that gain a lot of the media coverage too.
That's right, and that's the point, right? So we do have people on the extremes, and they fight quite a bit about wolves, which garners lots of attention and lots of media attention, takes the time of conservation professionals engaging in these debates and the courts and these lawsuits. But that's not representative of the broader public, and the Montanans look at wolves, and they are not that divided. There are very few people on either of those extremes. Most people have a pretty moderate view, and a pretty positive view of wolves. So, but those extremes and the stories that we hear in the media can actually create division among the broader public when that's all we hear about, and that drives our assumptions about what different groups believe. Yeah,
it's like the self-reinforcing feedback loop that we're stuck in.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the paper we called it like a tragically ironic outcome, where we assume that there's division, and that assumption creates the division when it didn't need to be there.
Did you just give our episode a title, a tragically ironic collaboration? Maybe not.
The end has yet to be written. So
That's true. Well, let's hope it's not written in the remaining parts of this conversation. Alex, what do we do with this insight? I mean, you're on the ground working with a lot of these outreach organizations, working with state agencies that are trying to make progress on this issue. How would you use these findings to help inform the work of people in the field trying to make progress?
Yeah, I mean, I think one is like having kind of the realization that we talked about in the beginning, which is like, we have all seen these identity forces at play.
Oh, yeah.
They are not outside our work. They are not something else that we could just wish away, or they are central to how people engage on conservation issues. And so,
yeah, and can I just pause on that, because
please.
I think it's important to acknowledge or just clarify that we observed this effect, this malleability of attitudes based on political identity activation across the political spectrum. This is not a Republican problem. It's not a Democratic problem. It's a human tendency.
Absolutely. Yep. And so being aware of that, being aware that we ourselves are susceptible to that, I think there's just a broader awareness in the conservation
Yeah.
community that hopefully this can serve to create. And then you touched on the next one, which is like not falling in the traps, right? Lots of our communication to supporters or to people we're trying to convince or people we're trying to raise money from inadvertently activates different identities. And when we activate identities that are associated with division, we get division. And sometimes people might want that, but often we don't.
Yeah.
And so just making sure that you're aligning your kind of use of identity in the ways that or in ways that can achieve the outcomes you're looking for. So that's kind of the second. But then I tend to think that conservation issues, whichever side you're on, are going to have better outcomes when people are working together. And so I think the next step is like, how do we take these identity forces that can really easily divide us and flip them around to bring people together to work on outcomes that we can all agree on?
Yeah, how do we apply this to other domains? I mean, you mentioned grizzly bears at the head of this conversation. You work on issues with regard to grizzly bears. You work on issues with regard to, conservation-oriented agricultural practices, weed control, a wide variety of domains where these identity forces could be playing a role in current stalemates or progress or any version.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first and kind of biggest lesson that I've learned out of the identity literature and kind of using it to improve relationships between groups is that it's really easy to draw lines between people.
Yeah.
And once we do that, we're really good at finding our camps and fighting with each other. But short-circuiting that is fairly easy by drawing the circle around people, drawing a bigger circle that includes us all. When we think of ourselves as Democrats or Republicans, we are quick to fight, even if there's really no fight to be had.
Mm-hmm.
But when we think of ourselves as Montanans or we think of ourselves as Americans, we draw that circle wider. And we turn that care and empathy that we extend to our in-group to kind of everyone around us. And so it's really powerful in that way. In grizzly bears, we've done a little research in this space as well. Grizzly bears are tough to live with.
They're much more dangerous than wolves to live in proximity.
Yeah, and so we've done lots of interviews trying to understand that from people who are living with grizzly bears. And I think that we have found in some of our other research that people who identify with those folks who are experiencing negative effects of grizzly bears, they really do a good job of extending empathy to those folks. It's almost like their experiences are like they can put themselves in their shoes of these other folks.
Yeah.
But if you hear these stories about how hard it is to live with grizzly bears and you don't identify with those folks, you really easily dismiss those stories.
Oh, interesting.
And so those, like that differential empathy, like we care for and take care of members of our in-group and we don't do that for the out-group, can really serve to divide us on an issue. And so right now we see really, really high attitudes towards grizzly bears, but they are tough to live with. And if we don't extend empathy to the folks who are living with grizzly bears, they're going to divide us. And so there's lots of forces there going on that I think we can pay better attention to.
So what's next for you as a scholar? What are you most excited about coming down the pipeline?
Yeah, I mean, I am really excited about continuing this work in identity. But I think it plays a role in kind of a bigger view of conservation.
Is that the tragic irony?
Yeah, exactly.
You're excited about continuing, but you're kind of stuck with me.
Yeah. So most of the conservation issues that we work on and that we kind of experience are collective action problems. Like they take contributions from lots of people in order to achieve a particular outcome. And often we see tensions between like individuals' interests and a group outcome. And so like you've done a lot of work in wildfire as have I, like everyone benefits if all of our homes and yards are kept fire-wise, because it reduces the risk of wildfire spreading.
Yes.
Not just to us, but to our neighbors.
Yeah, you can make your home as hardened to fire as you want, but if your neighbor's home is,
not
a pile of fuel, that you're in tough luck.
That's right. And so that's one of these like collective action problems where one homeowner might say, what role do I have to play here? What's my contribution?
I'm just one person. How can I make a difference?
I'm just one person. Look at all my neighbors. They've done it great. Or my neighbors are terrible, and so what could my...
Whatever it is.
Yeah. And so we see these tensions between individual interests and group. And I think identity plays a big role in whether we are willing to make individual sacrifices on behalf of a group so that we can all be better off. And so you and I have talked about lots of different aspects of those collective action problems. And I think identity plays a role kind of at a more base level across all of those different aspects. So I'm really interested to dig more into that.
Yeah, and I think the bottom line is like all of our in-groups are the best.
Absolutely.
Right, and we all think they're the best. And it's really hard to move us off of those positions.
Go Grizz.
Yeah.
And now that you're on my side, go Patriots.
Okay, there we go. Yeah. Any speed round here? What's your appetite to continue, Dr. Metcalf?
Yeah, fire away. I mean, I had one question for you.
Oh, okay.
If I can start there.
Bring the heat.
I'm curious. You've been studying identity for a long time. And as you think back, you kind of asked me this question about the different life experiences that you've had that led you to that interest in identity. What stands out to you?
Well, my entry point to identity came through my interest in marketing and branding. It's just, I saw the power of branding occurring in myself, that I was willing to pay more for an identical, if not similar product, just based on the brand that it had on it. And, I believed in the magic of that brand. I believed in the story behind it. And it, even though I sort of had an academic knowledge of how branding operated, it still had an influence on me as a consumer. And so that was sort of a tragic irony that I had to confront. And that led me down the pathway of kind of being interested in identity. And then as a grad student, I got involved in a lab that was run by Tony Greenwald at the University of Washington. He was one of the pioneers of implicit social cognition, the implicit association test, implicit bias. A lot of these automatic or preconscious or sensations we have that are unavailable to introspection, those things exist in all of us. And he was figuring out ways to test them and measure them and use those measurements to predict behavior. Identity was a big part of that. So the methodology of how you could study identity at an implicit level sort of drew me in. And that led down this path of trying to think about threats to identity and how those manifest in your subsequent behaviors.
Isn't it wild how even being aware of all of these forces, you're still susceptible to them?
Absolutely.
Always.
Yeah.
It's so bonkers to me.
Yeah.
And
I mean, that's the power of these things. And to me, that's what attracts me to study them.
Yep, absolutely.
I'm like, wow, if I know that this thing is out there as a force, and yet I'm still allowing myself to be influenced by it, despite my better judgment, why not? This is a fun thing to study. Yeah.
All right, rapid fire.
Okay, you're bringing the rapid fire to me?
No, I don't know. I don't have any rapid fire. No, I thought I was submitting to your rapid fire.
Yeah, I don't have any. Let me check my notes before we cancel this thing. Yeah. I think I'll just close by saying I'm really grateful for this, not only this collaboration and friendship, Alex, but the fact that we work at a place, the University of Montana, the College of Forestry and Conservation, the College of Business, where we actually have license to collaborate. There's a lot of academia is, it's a field designed for specialists, and there's a lot of rewards to getting more and more narrow. Cynical way of expressing that is like we learn more and more about less and less. And here we have license to collaborate across domains. It can be challenging at times to pull off, but I think the fact that we can do it and there are rewards to doing it and there's support for doing it, I think it's a beautiful thing.
I feel the same way. I often say that I don't think I can work in academia, but I can work at UM because we have a lot of flexibility to do things that folks at other universities don't get to do, and this is one of them.
Yeah, that's well put. So have you filled your elk tag yet?
Oh, come on. Ouch. Identity threat.
Yeah,
identity threat.
Exactly.
No, I have not. No. I'm going to blame it on the weather.
Yeah, climate change, right?
Climate change.
How do we fix that? That's a collective action problem.
Sure is.
Okay, let's leave it at that. Dr. Alex Metcalf, thanks for stopping by.
Thanks, Justin.